Recently, I posted a video of an article written in The New Yorker by JR, who was Prince Harry's ghostwriter for Spare. And I did that for two reasons. The first one is it's a really good article and I was interested. And the second reason was I knew it was going to be covered by British media outlets, and I wanted to be sure that I knew what was in the piece to then compare to what they cover. And let's just say it's something. Let's take a look at these articles. This one is from The Mirror. I will say one of the most important things you can do is read the headlines, because that is often where people stop. And publishers know that people will share stories without even reading them if the headline fits with their confirmed biases. Here's the headline: 5 bombshells from Prince Harry's ghostwriter, from 2 a.m. calls to tearful reactions. These bombshells include, quote, 2 a.m. calls, heated debates, kind gestures for Meghan Markle. Oh my God, she's a good hostess. Wild. I'm not entirely convinced most of these authors read past the first couple of paragraphs, or at the very least hit, Command F to search for Meghan Markle's name and other people. Almost every piece talks about this 2 a.m. row that opens up the piece in The New Yorker. But few actually explain the reason for the row, and it's an interesting part of the ghostwriting process. But it's maybe not salacious enough. Here's the part that gets me, though. Quote, the writer explained the capture was a simulation, but he described how the tortures inflicted in the scenario felt very real to Prince Harry. End quote. That's because the tortures inflicted were real. He didn't know what was happening at the time. And literally the author says that in the next paragraph. Quote, he described how the Duke was reportedly dragged to an underground bunker while he was physically, mentally, and emotionally beaten by his pretend captors. End quote. So it didn't just feel real, it was real. Who is editing these pieces? What most pieces leave out or is hidden at the bottom is the fact that this piece is primarily about being a ghostwriter and that experience, and JR's experience firsthand with the British media. 2 articles make it the framework of their piece, though. First one is the BBC. Prince Harry's ghostwriter recounts frenzy around memoir. And it opens with, quote, writing in the New Yorker magazine, JR said that he and his family were stalked and harassed by the press, but he also says the experience made him understand the prince better, end quote. It also notes at the top that this is the fastest selling nonfiction book in the UK since records began in 1998, which is something other outlets either ignore or bury at the bottom, because I don't think it falls in line with this idea that Harry is grossly unpopular and people just want him to go away, and no one read Spare. Moving on. The Guardian also focuses on the media intrusion that JR experienced while writing the book Spare and how it helped he and Prince Harry bond. Also, they shared the fact that they had both lost mothers, and that whether the grief was new or long ago, they both shared that connection and that loss. So this piece starts with the media intrusion and then goes into that 2 a.m. Zoom call, but this is how they frame it. So JR, quote, recounts pushing back on Harry's request to include a comeback he made during a military exercise in which he was involved in a simulated kidnapping. During the exercise, one of his pretend captors made a vile dig at Diana. Harry wanted his remark included because people had belittled his intellectual capabilities, and he wanted to show that he had said something clever, end quote. And they go on to describe why JR refused to do so, which gets to the heart of ghostwriting isn't just writing word for word a linear story. It's connecting themes and events from one's life to carve out a story from one's life to share with the wider public and things that they might be able to connect with. Compare that to The Mirror, which says, quote, the Duke of Sussex's ghostwriter revealed how a row with the prince left him feeling exasperated. JR said the pair got into a fierce debate in the summer of 2022, 2 years into his role as a ghostwriter on Spare. They were reviewing Prince Harry's latest edits in a late-night Zoom session at 2 a.m. when they came to a tricky section of the book. And then it goes on to say how Prince Harry started going back at him, his cheeks flushed, his eyes narrowed. He then ends with, quote, the section in question is when Prince Harry is captured by pretend terrorists at the end of a period of military exercises, end quote. This piece focuses on the emotions around that call, the sensational bits. And this one more or less lays out what happens and describes the intricacy and nuance behind that conversation. This piece never fully explains what the row is over. And then the Daily Mail's got to jump in, and Richard Eden is on the case. In an infamous, this is not a headline, I was exasperated. Prince Harry's ghostwriter JR tells of tensions between them while working on Spare, reveals the relationship became fraught, shouted at him, 2 a.m. The word fraught here is interesting. It feels like it's perhaps insinuating that their relationship broke down, when really it reads more like a breakthrough. A challenging one that could have definitely gone either way. Let's get into this bizarre opener. Quote, tensions between the Duke of Sussex and the rest of his family are so bad that Mike Tyndall once publicly joked that the royals would like to throw a few punches at him. End quote. Violence is so funny. Also weird because I remember some of y'all getting real mad when Harry talked about his experience, allegedly, of Prince William pushing him. Certainly didn't like that accusation then, but violence is all well and cool when we're just kidding around with friends. And we continue on with the emotions of the 2 a.m. row, not what the row was over. He goes on to talk about JR shouting at Harry. Eden quotes JR as saying, I was exasperated with Prince Harry, my head was pounding, my jaw was clenched, and I was starting to raise my voice. Half a dozen paragraphs later, and many a photo to scroll through, we finally get to what the row was over. And then it basically becomes a word-for-word copy and paste of the New Yorker article. Because no one is reading past the headline. I mean, look at these headlines. Don't read the comment section on this. It's infuriating. Finally, the Daily Express, that has the headline, Prince Harry Spare ghostwriter found the Duke of Sussex's story frustrating. Now, the way frustrating is used here could mean a whole host of things. Here's the opening sentence. Quote, Prince Harry's story has been described as relatable and infuriating by the ghostwriter who penned his hugely successful memoir Spare. End quote. Then a couple paragraphs down, it's explained what the author means. When JR says he finds it relatable and infuriating, it's because, quote, the way he'd been treated by both strangers and intimates was grotesque, end quote. So he's more frustrated on Harry's behalf, but that's not clear in the headline or the first couple of paragraphs. And gotta love when they hit you with a poll at the end. They quote a Newsweek poll as proof that Americans disapprove of Harry. It's a Newsweek poll, and of course they don't include the methodology or any additional information. But I'm going to just make an educated guess that this poll was mostly taken by older, conservative, whiter Americans. And I have found in my experience and looking at any coverage of Prince Harry that conservative media tends to take a pro-monarchy stance and bash Harry, Meghan, and the rest of the media really doesn't. I'm not saying everyone, but there does seem to be a Venn diagram and overlap between conservative voters in America and people that are anti-Harry and Meghan. That is some of the British media coverage of the ghostwriter's article in the New Yorker, and that's why you should always read the original piece.